30,000 visitors, $20 parking fees, countless wagons full of pumpkins, merchandise, and expensive snacks. The math should be incredibly simple. Roloff Farms is an absolute gold mine in October. It is the month that pays the bills for the entire year, the legacy that built the empire. So why did Matt Roloff allegedly tell the family that this last season was a financial disaster? The answer might lie in a report regarding a black duffel bag seen leaving the main office at 11 o'clock at night on Halloween. We have uncovered exclusive details and insider theories regarding what is being called the Pumpkin Season Heist, a brazen scheme to allegedly skim $200,000 in untraceable cash right off the top. And the person rumored to be holding the bag? Witnesses in deep dive investigations point the finger directly at Caryn Chandler. Where did the money go? And how did Marek reportedly calculate the exact amount missing down to the last dollar? Let's do the math. Welcome back to LPBW Update, your #1 source for the investigation into the reality behind reality TV. We dig deeper than the cameras ever dare to go. If you want to know the truth about the Roloff millions and the secrets being kept from the rest of the family, make sure you hit that like button right now. It helps us get this information out to more fans who deserve to know the truth. And please subscribe and turn on notifications. We are tracking a developing legal situation involving TLC that you are not going to want to miss, so make sure you are subscribed to be the first to hear about it. Now, let's follow the money. To understand the magnitude of this alleged heist, you have to understand how Roloff Farms operates. For 11 months out of the year, the farm is a money pit. It requires maintenance, landscaping, property taxes, and equipment repairs. It is a massive drain on resources. But October is the harvest. October is the lifeblood. For decades, the pumpkin season has been the engine that keeps the Roloff legacy running. In the past, when the kids were younger and Amy was still heavily involved, the profits from October were transparent. Everyone knew that if the crowds were big, the bonus checks would be big. It was a simple equation. More people equals more money. But according to insider reports, the dynamic has shifted drastically in the last 3 years. Since Caryn Chandler took a more dominant role in the management of the farm operations and specifically the financial handling of the pumpkin patch, the narrative coming from the big house has changed. Instead of celebrating record-breaking crowds, the family has been met with grim faces and spreadsheets showing razor-thin margins. The catalyst for this entire investigation started with a simple email. Sources close to the family suggest that immediately following the close of the most recent pumpkin season, Matt Roloff sent a mass email to the children, Zach, Jeremy, Jacob, and Molly. The email was supposedly intended to temper their expectations regarding any profit sharing or bonuses. The narrative Matt spun was one of doom and gloom. He claimed that inflation had destroyed their bottom line. He cited rising costs for fertilizer, insurance premiums skyrocketing, and the cost of temporary labor doubling. The message was clear: we barely broke even. There is no money to go around. For Zach and Tori, this news was confusing, but they are not forensic accountants. They accepted the word of the patriarch, even if it felt wrong. They lived their lives, raising their children, and they trusted that Matt, despite his flaws, wouldn't lie about the basic solvency of the farm. However, they aren't the only ones watching the farm. There is a new set of eyes on the operation, a pair of eyes that are trained in real estate, business valuation, and logical deduction. Those eyes belong to Marek. Marek is not like the other members of the Roloff circle. He isn't emotional, he isn't prone to exaggeration, and most importantly, he understands business. He spent the entire month of October visiting the farm, supporting Amy, and simply observing the operations. What he saw with his own eyes did not match the email Matt sent out. Chris saw the traffic jams, He saw the line of cars backed up down the highway, waiting an hour just to turn into the parking lot. He saw the overflow parking sections being opened up day after day. According to exclusive theories circulating among those close to the production, Chris decided to do a quick mental calculation one afternoon while standing near the main gate. He wasn't trying to catch anyone initially. He was just curious. He counted the cars entering the lot over the course of a single hour. 500 cars. The entry fee for parking alone is $20. That is $10,000 in cash generated in just 60 minutes, strictly from parking. That doesn't include the entry tickets, the pumpkins, the food, or the wagon tours. That is just the parking lot. Chris extrapolated that number. If the farm is open for 8 hours a day, that is $80,000 in parking fees per day. If they are open every weekend in October plus Fridays, the revenue purely from getting cars onto the grass is astronomical. When Matt claimed they broke even, Chris Mark's internal alarm bells started ringing. He knows what fertilizer costs, he knows what insurance costs, and he knows that those costs did not eat up hundreds of thousands of dollars in surplus revenue. The math was broken. And when the math is broken in a cash-heavy business, it usually means one thing: skimming. The investigation began quietly. Chris didn't go to Amy immediately, and he certainly didn't confront Matt. He needed more than just a hunch. He needed data. The theory gaining traction is that Chris recruited a quiet, unsuspecting ally. He reached out to a connection, a former employee who had worked the ticket booth during the peak of the season. This wasn't a family member who could be manipulated by Matt. This was a local teenager, a friend of a friend, who had no loyalty to the Roloff narrative and just wanted to share their experience. What this employee revealed blew the lid off the entire operation. This brings us to the concept of the ghost ticket. In the modern era, businesses love digital transactions. Credit card swipes, iPad scanners, and online bookings are great because they are fast, but they are also permanent. Every time a credit card is swiped, a digital record is created that cannot be deleted without leaving a trace. If you want to steal money from a business that uses iPads, it is very difficult. However, cash is different. Cash has no memory. Cash doesn't leave a digital footprint unless someone manually enters it into the ledger. The insider source reportedly told Chris that there was a very specific, very strange protocol enforced during the busiest hours of the weekends. According to this account, for approximately 2 hours every Saturday and Sunday, specifically between the hours of 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. when the line was longest, Caryn Chandler would allegedly come down to the ticket booth. Her instructions were unusual. She supposedly told the staff that the internet was slow or that the system was crashing due to the volume of transactions. She instructed the booth workers to stop using the iPad scanners for cash payments. Instead, they were told to take the cash, put it in a separate drawer, and hand the customers a physical paper ticket from a red roll. These were old school carnival tickets, the kind you buy at a dollar store. They were not linked to the computer system. They were not tracked by the official farm software. This was the loophole, the ghost ticket. If a customer pays $20 in cash and you hand them a paper ticket that isn't scanned, that transaction effectively never happened in the eyes of the IRS or the digital accounting software. It is invisible money. The only way to know that money exists is to count the physical cash in the drawer or to count the missing paper tickets from the roll. The genius of the scheme and the tragedy of it was the simplicity. Matt and Caryn could simply claim that the internet was down to justify the switch to paper tickets. It is a plausible excuse. Farm internet is notoriously spotty. But the employee noticed a pattern. The internet wasn't actually down. The credit card machines were working fine. The instruction to switch to paper tickets for cash only always coincided with the peak rush. the time when money was coming in so fast it was almost impossible to count. The employee, perhaps sensing that something was off, or maybe just being diligent, did something that the architects of this scheme did not anticipate. They kept a log. The employee noted down the serial numbers on the rolls of paper tickets at the start of the shift and at the end of the shift. They knew exactly how many paper tickets were handed out during those internet blackout periods. When Chris Marek sat down with this information, the picture started to become terrifyingly clear. He asked the employee for the numbers. How many rolls of tickets were used? How many weekends did this happen? The employee estimated that over the course of the month, roughly 10,000 paper tickets were distributed during these specific cash-only windows. Chris ran the numbers again. 10,000 tickets, $20 per ticket. That is $200,000. $200,000 in cash that was never run through the iPad. $2,100 that never hit the main server. $200,000 that theoretically did not exist. But cash doesn't just disappear. It has mass. It takes up space. If you have $200,000 in $20 bills, that is a substantial pile of physical currency. It has to go somewhere. It has to be moved. You cannot just put it in your pocket. You need a container. And this is where the investigation pivoted from a financial discrepancy to a physical hunt for the missing loot. The timeline is crucial here. The employee stated that at the end of these shifts, the cash from the paper ticket drawer was not mixed with the cash from the digital drawer. Standard procedure for the farm, going back years, was for the daily earnings to be bagged up in verified, tamper-proof bank bags that were collected by an armored courier or deposited directly into the business night drop. However, the cash from the paper ticket sales was handled differently. The insider claims that Caryn Chandler personally came to the booth to collect that specific drawer. She didn't put it in the blue bank bag. She didn't log it on the daily tally sheet that the manager signed. According to the witness, she swept the cash into a nondescript personal tote bag. This brings us back to Halloween night. The season is over. The final tallies are being done. The official numbers are being sent to the accountant to prepare the disappointing email that Matt would eventually send to his children. But on the ground, a different operation was taking place. A witness, who we will discuss in more detail later, reported seeing a figure leaving the main farmhouse office late at night. The figure was carrying a heavy black duffel bag. This wasn't just a bag of clothes. The way the bag moved, the weight of it, suggested it was packed densely. If the theory holds true, that bag contained the proceeds of the ghost ticket scheme. But where was it going? This wasn't just about hiding money from the kids. If this theory is correct, this is about hiding money from the government. This is the definition of skimming. And if Chris Marek's calculations are even remotely accurate, the amount of money involved pushes this out of the realm of a family dispute and into the realm of federal crime. Chris knew he couldn't just accuse them based on the words of one teenager. He needed to build a case. He needed to prove that the money was generated, and he needed to prove that it never landed in the bank account. He began to compile a dossier. He started looking at aerial photography. In the age of social media, nothing is private. Fans fly drones over the farm constantly during pumpkin season to get cool footage for Instagram. Chris realized that these drone videos were not just fan content, they were evidence. By looking at the timestamps on the drone footage and comparing them to the density of the crowds in the plaza, Chris could scientifically estimate the foot traffic. You can count the heads. You can count the cars. If the drone footage shows 3,000 people on the property at 2 o'clock p.m., but the daily sales report only shows 1,000 tickets sold, the discrepancy is undeniable. It is proof that people were there and they paid to get in, but the money is gone. The tension began to rise. Amy Roloff, who still holds a financial interest in the success of the farm and is owed payouts based on its performance, began to sense Chris's unease. She knows Chris. She knows he doesn't get worked up over nothing. When he finally sat her down to explain what he was looking into, the color allegedly drained from her face. This wasn't just Matt being cheap. This wasn't just Matt being controlling. This was a betrayal of the entire family trust. If Matt and Caryn were pocketing cash to fund their retirement home in Arizona while telling Zach and Jeremy that the farm was failing, it would be the final nail in the coffin of the Roloff family relationship. But the biggest question remained: how could they think they would get away with it? In a town as small as theirs, where everyone talks, and with a family as public as the Roloffs, secrets are hard to keep. It seems they banked on the idea that no one would actually check the math. They banked on the idea that the kids were too distracted and Amy was too removed to notice the missing $200,000. They didn't count on the new factor. They didn't count on Marek. As Chris built his spreadsheet, he divided the columns into projected revenue based on the car counts and drone footage versus reported revenue based on the limited information Matt had shared. The gap was a gaping hole. It wasn't a rounding error. It was exactly $200,000. The precision of the number was chilling. It suggested this wasn't accidental mismanagement. It was a calculated target. The spreadsheet that Marek compiled was not merely a collection of numbers. It was an indictment. It was a forensic reconstruction of a crime scene where the weapon was a calculator and the victim was the truth. After weeks of gathering data, analyzing drone footage, and speaking to the terrified ticket booth employee, Chris sat Amy Roloff down at her kitchen table. The house was quiet. The cameras were off. This wasn't a scene for the show. This was real life. Chris opened his laptop and turned the screen toward her. What Amy saw made her stomach turn. On the screen was a graph with 2 lines. The blue line represented projected revenue, calculated using the car counts, the drone density analysis, and the historical data from previous years when Amy managed the books. The blue line went up, sharp and steady, peaking beautifully on the weekends. Then there was the red line. This was reported revenue, the numbers Matt had provided in his gloomy emails. The red line was flat, anemic, and suspiciously low. Between the blue line and the red line was a massive gray area. Chris pointed to that gray void. That, he explained, is the kill zone. That is where the money is disappearing. That gap represents exactly 10,000 visitors who effectively vanished into thin air. Amy, who has spent decades dealing with Matt's chaotic management style, tried to find a logical explanation. Maybe the weather was bad. Chris pulled up the weather reports for October. Clear skies, mild temperatures, perfect pumpkin weather. Maybe they gave away more free tickets to charity. Chris pulled up the charity logs. Standard donations, nothing out of the ordinary. Every excuse Amy tried to invent to protect the father of her children was systematically dismantled by the data. The reality was unavoidable. The farm had generated a fortune, but the bank account was empty. The time for observation was over. It was time for a confrontation. Amy called for a shareholder meeting. Technically, even though the land has been divided and sold, there are still business entanglements and outstanding debts that give Amy the right to demand financial transparency. She didn't tell Matt what the meeting was about. She simply said they needed to review the season's closeout numbers before tax season ramped up. Matt agreed, likely assuming he could steamroll her with his usual barrage of complaints about inflation and supply chain issues. He didn't know that Chris was coming, and he certainly didn't know that Chris was bringing the spreadsheet. The atmosphere in the conference room at the main office was icy. Matt sat at the head of the table, flanked by Caryn. They looked relaxed, perhaps even a bit smug, armed with their prepared narrative of a hard year. Matt launched into his speech immediately, talking about how the cost of diesel fuel had eaten their profits and how insurance premiums were bleeding them dry. He spoke fast, using complicated jargon, a tactic he often uses to confuse the issue. Chris waited. He let Matt finish his monologue. He let him spin the entire web of lies. And then, without saying a word, Chris connected his laptop to the large monitor on the wall. The graph appeared. The room went silent. Chris stood up and walked to the screen. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like a professor correcting a student who had cheated on an exam. He pointed to the peak of the blue line. He asked Matt a simple question. Matt, you claimed in your email that we had 20,000 paid visitors this year. That is the number you reported to the family. But looking at this aerial photography taken on October 15th and October 22nd, we have physically counted the heads in the plaza. The density analysis proves without a shadow of a doubt that there were 30,000 people on the property. Where is the entry fee for those 10,000 people? Matt's reaction was classic deflection. He stuttered. He shifted in his chair. He started talking about refunds. He claimed that thousands of people demanded their money back because of muddy paths. He claimed that the drone footage was misleading, that it counted employees and volunteers. But Chris was ready. He had the employee logs. There weren't 10,000 volunteers. There weren't 10,000 refunds. The math didn't work. But the most telling reaction in the room didn't come from Matt. It came from Caryn Chandler. Throughout the entire presentation, while Matt was blustering and making excuses, Caryn did not speak. She did not defend the numbers. She did not offer an explanation. Witnesses to the aftermath of the meeting suggest that she sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the spreadsheet projected on the wall. It was the silence of someone who knows they have been caught. She knew about the ghost tickets. She knew about the cash-only windows. She knew that the blue line on the graph was the truth, and the red line was the fiction they had concocted to hide the skim. The meeting ended without a resolution. Matt stormed out, claiming he was being interrogated in his own house and refusing to discuss it further until he spoke to his accountant. But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had turned into a tree of evidence. Amy left that meeting shaking. She realized that this wasn't just mismanagement. This was theft, and if it was theft, she was liable. If the IRS audited the farm and found a $200,000 discrepancy, they wouldn't just go after Matt. They would come for everyone associated with the business. But Chris knew that a spreadsheet, no matter how accurate, was still just theoretical. To nail this down, to truly prove where the money went, they needed to find the cash. They needed to move from the digital world to the physical world. This brings us to the most explosive part of the investigation, the witness in the dark. Following the disastrous meeting, word began to spread among the lower-level farm staff that questions were being asked. The loyalty that Matt thought he commanded began to fracture. A farmhand, who we will refer to as the Watcher, came forward anonymously. This individual had worked on the property for several seasons. They were used to the chaotic nature of the farm, but they had seen something on Halloween night that had haunted them. The Watcher contacted Chris through an intermediary. They agreed to meet in a neutral location, away from the prying eyes of the farm cameras and the production crew. The story the Watcher told filled in the final missing piece of the puzzle. It was Halloween night, the last day of the season. The gates had closed, the last guest had gone home, and the cleanup was underway. The farm is spooky at night, full of shadows and rusting equipment. The Watcher was doing a final perimeter check near the main office around 11 p.m. The lights in the office were still on, which was unusual. Usually, after the last day, everyone clears out to celebrate. The Watcher saw the back door of the office open. Matt was not there. It was just Caryn. According to the witness statement, Caryn emerged carrying a large black duffel bag. It wasn't a purse. It wasn't a laptop bag. It was a heavy-duty travel bag, the kind you use for a week-long trip. The Watcher noted that she struggled with the weight of it. She had to use both hands to hoist it into the trunk of her personal SUV. Now, under normal circumstances, a manager taking things home isn't a crime. Maybe it was paperwork. Maybe it was leftover merchandise. But the watcher noticed something else. The standard procedure for cash handling at Roloff Farms is strict. Cash is counted, placed in tamper-proof bags, and then an armored truck service or two senior managers together takes it to the night depository at the local business bank. Caryn was alone, and she didn't turn left toward the town center where the farm's business bank is located. She turned right. The watcher, driven by a gut feeling that something was wrong, decided to follow at a distance. They drove down the dark country roads, trailing Caryn's taillights. She didn't go to her house. She didn't go to Matt's house. She drove 20 minutes out of the way to a neighboring town. She pulled into the parking lot of a small private credit union, a bank that the farm does not use for its official business. The watcher observed from across the street it was nearly midnight. The bank was obviously closed, but Caryn didn't go to the night drop. She went to the ATM vestibule, which requires a card to enter. She lugged the heavy black bag inside. She was there for nearly 20 minutes. When she came out, the bag was noticeably lighter. She tossed it effortlessly into the back seat and drove away. This testimony changes everything. If this account is true, it implies that the cash from the ghost tickets, the $200,000 that Chris identified as missing, was physically removed from the farm premises and deposited into a private account or a safety deposit box that is completely separate from the Roloff Farms ledger. This is the definition of a slush fund. Why would they do this? The theories are rampant. Some insiders suggest that Caryn and Matt are planning an exit strategy. With the kids losing interest in the farm and the show's ratings fluctuating, they might be looking to build a nest egg that doesn't have to be split with Amy or the children. $200,000 in cash is a lot of buying power. It pays for renovations in Arizona, it pays for vacations, it pays for a comfortable life away from the mud and the drama. But the method they allegedly used is dangerous. Structuring cash deposits to avoid federal reporting requirements is a felony. Taking money from a business without recording it as income is tax evasion. By moving that money in the dead of night in a personal vehicle and depositing it into a non-business account, the line between bad business management and criminal enterprise was crossed. Chris Marek realized the gravity of the situation. He wasn't just looking at a family dispute anymore. He was holding evidence of a crime. The spreadsheet proved the money was missing. The witness proved where it went. The motive was clear. The only thing left to do was to close the trap. Amy was devastated by the witness's account. It confirmed her worst fears. She realized that for years she might have been skimming the surface of a much deeper deception. But Amy is not just a victim. She is a matriarch, and she is a businesswoman. She realized that she held the trump card. She had the proof. And she knew that Matt, for all his bravado, is terrified of two things: the IRS and public scandal. The investigation was complete. The evidence was gathered. The numbers were irrefutable. It was time for the final move. Chris and Amy began to draft the ultimatum. This wasn't going to be another argument filmed for TLC. This was going to be a legal demand. They were going to ask for the money back. All of it, but they had to be careful. If they went to the police, the farm could be seized, the show could be canceled, the legacy would be destroyed. They needed to find a way to get justice without burning the entire kingdom to the ground. They needed to force Matt to pay up voluntarily and to do it fast. As the deadline for the tax filing approached, the tension in the family was palpable. Zach and Tori, who had been kept in the dark about the specifics since the shift, they stopped coming to the farm. The Sunday dinner stopped. The silence was deafening. Everyone was waiting for the explosion. And then Chris made the call. He didn't call Matt. He called Caryn. He told her simply and calmly that they knew about the black bag. He told her they knew about the credit union in the neighboring town. He told her they had the serial numbers from the ticket rolls. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He just stated the facts. He told her that she had 48 hours to fix the accounting error before the spreadsheet was sent to the state auditor. The panic that must have ensued in the big house can only be imagined. The walls were closing in. The heuristic analysis of the situation suggests that Matt and Caryn had to make a choice: keep the money and risk prison, or give it back and pretend it was all a misunderstanding. The stage was set for the final resolution. The money was gone, but could they force it to reappear? And what would happen to the relationship between the family members once the truth was finally acknowledged out loud? The heist was executed perfectly, but the getaway was sloppy. They forgot that in the world of the Roloffs, someone is always watching. The clock began to tick, 48 hours. That was the window Chris, Marek, and Amy Roloff gave Matt to rectify what they generously called an accounting error, but what the evidence suggested was a calculated embezzlement. The atmosphere at Roloff Farms during those 2 days was described by insiders as suffocating. The production crew, who are usually buzzing around trying to capture every moment of drama, were reportedly kept at arm's length. The doors to the big house were locked. The blinds were drawn. Inside, a frantic scramble was taking place to save the empire from total collapse. Amy Roloff found herself in an impossible position. Despite the anger, despite the betrayal, and despite the undeniable proof staring her in the face, she is still a mother. She realized that if she handed that spreadsheet and the witness testimony directly to the IRS, it wouldn't just be a fine. It would be a federal case. Matt could face prison time. The farm would likely be seized to pay back taxes and penalties. The legacy she built for her grandchildren would be auctioned off by the government. She didn't want to destroy the family. She just wanted what was hers. She wanted the truth to be acknowledged, and she wanted the money back in the business account where it belonged. The ultimatum was surgically precise. Chris, Marek had drafted the terms. They didn't want an apology. Apologies are cheap, and Matt Roloff is an expert at giving empty ones. They wanted a deposit. They demanded that the full sum of $200,000, the exact amount estimated to be missing from the ghost ticket scheme, be deposited back into the corporate operating account within 2 business days. If the money appeared, they would agree to label the discrepancy as a clerical oversight and move on. If the money did not appear, the dossier would be overnighted to the state attorney general. For 48 hours, there was silence. No emails, no phone calls, just the heavy, oppressive weight of waiting. Amy reportedly spent the time gardening, trying to work off the nervous energy. Chris went back to his real estate work, confident in his math and his strategy. They knew they had Matt cornered. Matt loves money, but he loves his freedom and his reputation more. He was trapped between his greed and his ego. Then, on the morning of the 3rd day, a notification pinged on the shared digital ledger that Amy still has access to as a minority stakeholder. It was a deposit notification from the bank. Chris Mark opened the file. He adjusted his glasses and leaned in. There it was, a single transfer, $200,000. But the devil is in the details. In the accounting software, every deposit needs a label. It needs a category so the accountant knows how to file it for taxes. Usually, income is labeled as sales or services. This deposit was not labeled as sales. It was labeled as director loan repayment. This was the smoking gun. This was the admission of guilt they were looking for. By labeling it as a loan repayment, Matt was essentially admitting that he had taken the money out. You cannot repay a loan that you never took. There was no paperwork for a loan. There was no board meeting approving a loan to Matt. He had taken the cash, and now, forced by the threat of exposure, he was putting it back and pretending he had just borrowed it. It was a frantic, clumsy attempt to wash the money clean. The money had traveled from the cash drawer to the black duffel bag to the private credit union and finally back into the farm account. The loop was closed. The heist had been reversed. But while the books were balanced, the relationships were shattered. The return of the money confirmed every suspicion Chris and Amy had. It proved that the inflation story was a lie. It proved that the bad year narrative was a fabrication designed to lower the expectations of the rest of the family. The farm hadn't lost money. The money had simply been moved. The fallout inside the big house was rumored to be explosive. Sources close to the couple suggest that Caryn Chandler was absolutely furious. This wasn't just about getting caught. This was about losing their exit strategy. The leading theory among insiders is that this $200,000 was earmarked for something specific. It was widely believed to be the down payment on a massive renovation for their retirement property in Arizona, or perhaps a secret fund to buy out the remaining family shares completely. When Matt was forced to wire that money back to the farm to save his own skin, he essentially drained their secret nest egg. Caryn, who had allegedly done the heavy lifting, the bag carrying, the late night deposit, the coordination of the paper tickets, was left with nothing to show for her risk but a close call with the law. Rumors began to swirl that Caryn felt Matt had folded too easily. She felt they could have bluffed their way out of it. But Matt, looking at Chris Marek's impeccable math, knew they had zero leverage. The Pumpkin Season Heist was foiled not by the police, but by a spreadsheet. This incident fundamentally changed the power dynamic on the farm. For years, Matt Roloff was the unquestioned king. He controlled the narrative, the money, and the land. But this time, he was outsmarted. Chris Marek, the quiet, logical, unassuming outsider, had walked into the lion's den and taken the lion's share back. He proved that numbers do not lie. You can manipulate people. You can manipulate storylines for a reality show, but you cannot manipulate the basic laws of mathematics. Amy Roloff got her justice. The farm's account was replenished, ensuring that there would be operating capital for the next season. But the trust is gone forever. Zach and Tori, hearing the whispers of what happened, have pulled further away. They realized that the costs were up email was a manipulation tactic. They realized that their inheritance was being siphoned off in duffel bags. The emotional toll of the heist is far greater than the financial one. The money was returned, but the family bond was the price they paid. As we look back at the evidence, the drone footage showing 30,000 people, the employee testimony about the cash-only loophole, the witness seeing the black bag, and the mysterious loan repayment, it becomes clear that this was one of the most audacious schemes in reality TV history. They tried to skim the pumpkin profits right under the noses of the cameras, but they forgot one thing. You can't cheat the math. So where do we go from here? The farm is still standing, but the foundation is rotten. Matt Roloff remains the manager, but for how long? Can a CEO survive when the shareholders know he tried to rob the company? This brings us to the most important question for you, the viewer. We have laid out the timeline. We have shown you the evidence. We have followed the money from the ticket booth to the bank and back again. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Matt Roloff should step down as manager of the farm after this? Is it safe for the legacy of the farm to leave him in charge of the finances? And more importantly, if you visit the pumpkin patch this October, will you be paying with cash or credit, knowing that your cash might end up in a secret slush fund? Instead of supporting the farm, would you still go? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are you Team Matt, believing this was all just a big misunderstanding? Or are you Team Chris, the man who brought the receipts and exposed the truth? I think we all know who the real MVP of this season is. And do not go anywhere, because the drama is far from over. If you thought the Pumpkin Season Heist was crazy, you are not going to believe what we have uncovered next. we have obtained court documents regarding a massive lawsuit filed by TLC against Matt Roloff for breach of contract. It turns out hiding money isn't just a problem for Amy. It violates the terms of his reality TV contract too. We are breaking down the legal filing, the potential millions in damages, and what this means for the future of Little People, Big World in our next video. You do not want to miss this deep dive into the legal battle that could end the show forever. Make sure you are subscribed, hit that notification bell so you are alerted the second the video drops, and smash that like button if you enjoyed this investigative report. We are LPBW Update, and we will see you in the next one. Keep watching and keep counting.